Approve the minutes of August 15th, 2023.
I move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Okay.
Hearing none.
Hearing none, approved.
Second item, election of officers.
I'd like to move that we elect Charles Cadenhead to be the chair,
Thank you. Usually they're good.
unless there's some conflict of interest with that.
There is not, I mean, I know in the past he had wanted to have residents kind of take charge and have council members sit back. Not sit back, that's not the right word, but it's up to you two. I will defer on this one. If you two want it, I'll vote for it.
I second that. Run smoother.
Any discussion on the motion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I'd be willing to be the vice chair because I wasn't this past year, so I could do it again.
I'll nominate Tony.
I second that.
Do you have a speech? No? Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I guess I have to recuse myself because I'm running. Okay.
All those opposed? Approved.
All right, so tonight, the EDA will be reviewing the city's sign ordinance. The city's sign ordinance was last updated in 2018, and staff has identified a need to review the ordinance to ensure it is consistent with surrounding cities, and to eliminate unclear and contradictory language. So staff compiled a review of the City of Lake Elmo's ordinance, and then the City of Stillwater, Oakdale, and Cottage Grove, and compiled tables, specifically for key takeaways on wall signs, ground signs, and special districts or provisions. So tonight, staff is looking for guidance and feedback from the EDA as we begin to draft language for that ordinance. The process that this would follow, it's first going before you guys tonight for guidance and feedback, and then staff would actually draft the language and bring it forward to Planning Commission for a public hearing. Planning Commission can make their recommended amendments, and then it would go forward to City Council for final adoption. And then again, tonight is mainly a discussion, so there's no formal motion, just discussion and guidance on the ordinance and what other cities do. So the first table is for wall signs. We have highlighted sections across the top outlining the city, the size allowances, the number allowances, sign plans, and then if there's any other notable items. So I'll just go down column by column. The tan items indicate similar language between city codes. So I'll just go through, and we can either do questions at the end of each table or save them to the end. It's open how you guys want to lead it. So the City of Oakdale, their wall sign regulations are 20% of the total wall area with no individual wall sign over 150 square feet. The City of Stillwater is similar to Lake Elmo in that 1 square foot of signage per 1 lineal foot of building frontage on a street. The City of Cottage Grove does it based on principal structure size, so they have a breakdown between 100 and 200 square feet or 1.25 square feet of signage per 1 lineal foot of building frontage. And then again, Lake Elmo is 1-to-1 with no individual sign over 100 square feet. So Lake Elmo is generally similar to Stillwater, but it also is similar to Oakdale that they regulate individual wall signs. Moving on to number of signs, City of Oakdale is 1 sign per street frontage. City of Stillwater is 1 sign per street frontage with a maximum of 2 signs. Cottage Grove does not provide regulations on wall signs, likely because of their strict outline for principal structure size. And then Lake Elmo is 1 sign per street frontage for each occupant. And then they do allow a second sign, but that second sign would need to be 50% the net area of the primary sign. So if your ground sign was, or your wall sign was 100 square feet, on your corner, or on your primary frontage, your corner sign would only be 50 square feet.
What
And-
determines the primary frontage, whatever is the longest wall?
Typically, it's where your address is from.
All right.
Then sign plans, master sign plans. The city of Oakdale does not provide guidance on those. The city of Stillwater does require master sign plans. The city of Cottage Grove suggests them, and the city of Lake Elmo requires them specifically for PUDs and commercial or industrial projects.
Oh, by master sign plan, do you mean that the business has to submit their sign to the city and have it approved?
Correct.
Okay,
So
thank
their
you. That's how I
plan
read
would,
that.
correct, yeah, their plan would indicate all signage proposed on the site up front.
Okay, thank you.
And then notable items, the city of Lake Elmo does allow additional wall signs if the building frontage is 100 feet or longer. So you can have up to 3 ancillary wall signs. So if you had one tenant on one street that was 100 feet or longer on that frontage, they could have up to 4 wall signs. Any questions on wall signs? There's gonna be a lot of language here.
So I'm trying to visualize the businesses we have along Hudson west of Keats. Because their address would be the frontage road on the north side. And then they have south facing to 94. Did any of those might have been before I was even on the council when those got approved. Are all those then the ones that are south facing, since that is not their primary? All those ones that are south facing on the building are half the size as to what they are on the north side? Unless we gave them a variance at the time, which I don't recall.
Yeah, a lot of like Eagle Point Medical, they would have a PUD signage master plan. Crossroads amended their PUD. A lot of the other ones predate me, so I don't know if they received special flexibility.
So we might have done flexibility within the PUD.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Any other questions on wall signs?
Is there anything about height in any of the codes that talked about for the wall signs as to, because the buildings are gonna vary, some might be 15, some might be 2-story buildings. Did any of the cities mention anything about the view shed as to where it shall or shall not be in terms of that height?
They likely do along like the big box stores and the village district, regulating how far it can be above the street and how far it can hang over the street. I don't have those off the top of my head, though.
But it does touch on the topic.
Correct. Moving on to ground signs. Again, this is a similar format. City, size generally, height and area, number, and any other notable items. Again, tan indicates similar ordinances. So the city of Oakdale guides their ground signs based on the principal structure. The city of Stillwater guides their ground signs based on zoning district. The city of Cottage Grove is based on principal structure, which is again similar to Oakdale. And the city of Lake Elmo is based on classification of the street. Moving on to height and area, Oakdale is 25 feet in height, and then they allow up to an 80 square foot sign. If the sign has if the property has a second street frontage, they're allowed a second sign, but that sign would have to be 50% the net area, similar to how Lake Elmo's wall signs are. Stillwater is divided again by zoning district, so this column is broken down into 2 sub-columns. Business Park and Highway District is between 6 feet in height and 25 feet in height, with a sign face of 100 square feet, and then a maximum square footage of 200. So that's, if the sign had 2 faces, that'd be 200 square feet, so that's your maximum.
Oh.
That is the same regulation as the Village District, except for their sign height is 20 feet. Moving on to Cottage Grove, again, this is based on principal structure size, so that's why you'll see this broken down into a table. The sign height is the same across the board at 15 feet, but their sign area varies from 35 to 50 square feet. And then the city of Lake Elmo, again, is based on street classification, so you'll see we have a table also. Our table is between 10 and 12 feet in height, and 40 and 80 square feet. And then we also have a special provision for properties between 5th Street and 94 that allows a sign up to 30 feet in height and 250 square feet in area.
May I ask a question about the application of this? Is a business allowed a wall sign and a ground sign?
Correct,
So it's not either or, it's both?
correct.
thank you.
For Lake Elmo, I'd have to review the
Yeah.
other cities
No, no,
and their
just-
regulations.
Just like Elmo, sure.
So then moving on to the number of ground signs, Oakdale allows one sign per street frontage, similar to Lake Elmo, which is one sign per street frontage, or sorry, Stillwater, one sign per street frontage. Cottage Grove is one sign and then up to two signs if they have two or more access points. So this deviates where it's not based on street frontage, instead it's based on access points. And then Lake Elmo is one sign per street frontage, and then they're allowed an additional sign if their front property line is over 1,000 feet. Moving on to other notable items, Oakdale does have a special sign district for big box retail, and Stillwater has a special district for their commercial village, and I do have those tables that we can discuss here in a little bit. Are there any questions on ground signs?
When you say for big box retail, and I know what you're saying, but did they then define that with a specific definition? It means anything above this amount of square foot that does retail sales?
I don't have the exact definition of big box store, but they have it broken out into their section, or in their sign code as big box store regulations.
Okay.
All right, moving on. So special sign districts, this is an avenue that the city can pursue with amending its code at this time. If we wanted to break out special regulations for special districts. The city previously had this and appealed it, or repealed it in 2009. We had a special district for the Old Village and then a special sign district for the I-94 corridor. So just reviewing what Stillwater does in their village commercial district. Their wall signs, 1 square foot of signage per 1 lineal foot of building frontage, 1 sign per tenant, 1 sign per tenant space, and then they're allowed a sign surface area of 300 square feet. So this is wall signs and ground signs combined. And then freestanding ground signs, 100 square feet for each exposed face, and then a maximum sign area of 200 square feet. Height of 20 feet, 1 per development, and then that same regulation of 300 square feet of signage total on a property. And then Stillwater also allows multi-tenant master signs, which is 40 square feet or 1 square foot of signage per each 5 feet of building frontage. Height maximum of 8 feet, and then this would be the building master identification sign and would not contain names of tenants. So an example of that would be like the Stillwater Mills in downtown as you head north. It outlines the business name, but not necessarily the tenants. And then moving on to Oakdale's big box store. So this essentially just outlines regulations for those big box stores, which will likely be located on those higher intensity roads. And they, in short, allow a 350 square foot maximum sign, 150 square foot ancillary sign for sub-businesses. And then they also regulate not more than 10% of the wall area could be covered by signage. Any questions on the Stillwater or Oakdale special districts?
That sign we're talking about for Stillwater, whereas for the tenant, where it's providing the list, that's on State Highway, correct? Because that's State Highway 95.
It is.
I'm just reflecting back on the feedback that when we were trying to do something similar here, the feedback we had, because it's county for Lake Elmo, was we don't do those types of signs. So obviously the state DOT has different feedback.
No, those signs aren't made by the state.
No, just for placing, that's considered sign pollution, that like the county was indicating they don't really like to have additional signs. Say, here's your downtown with all the businesses listed.
I think those are two different.
Those would be considered off-premises signage. This is just looking at on-premises signage.
Oh, because that's a single building in Stillwater that has everything in that single build, okay, never mind.
And then I do also have the 2009 ordinance sections for the Old Village and I-94 district. We can dive into those if you'd like to. Otherwise, staff will stand for discussion and guidance on what you'd like to see out of the city's sign code and if there's any specific regulations from other cities that you might want to have staff review closer and include in our amendments.
Do the staff members have any intention to make significant changes, or is it just kind of a touch-up of the plan?
We'll review the entire ordinance, so there's some items that are duplicated or referenced, and it could be cleaned up. So we'll do some cleanup based on your feedback and feedback from the planning commission. That's, I guess, where staff would look to see how significantly we're changing the actual regulations.
Okay, my first impression on reviewing this, and I never looked at it before, was that it's very daunting. You know, if somebody starts a business, you know, that might take them a while to figure out what's going on here. And I really like the idea that community development director or somebody in the city could help when a business gets started to at least interpret sign regulations. But as far as any particular changes, I didn't see anything that made sense to me to recommend a particular change.
Well, what kind of sign would it be considered if it's coming off the building?
Like a banner sign?
Yeah.
A blade sign? Blade?
So,
So not flat to the building, but like sticking out over the sidewalk,
yeah.
because it's called a blade sign.
Would that fit in then as a wall sign for these purposes?
Correct.
And
It is-
now, because it's two-sided, it gets the square footage thing, the limit of the square footage now kind of makes the sign become half as big, because now you have two sides that are facing each different directions.
As long as the two faces are closer than 12 inches, it's considered one face, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Got it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Because see the scale of the building, that's the biggest we could have ours.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems pretty small.
Seems pretty small.
And one item that staff is looking to do is possibly, separate from updating the ordinance, creating some sort of guide or cheat sheet on how to review this code that's a little bit more business-friendly and user-friendly.
I would vote for that.
That was kind of something I was thinking as well. There's a difference between a Dairy Queen coming in where this is what they do, and they have people in their company or the people they hire who look through city codes in every city they build, and they know where to look, they know what the variations are. Whereas a person who wants to start their own small business, a sole prop, that's not their experience, that's not their skill set. I would agree with, Tony had mentioned it earlier, and what you would reference just now, a how-to guide, maybe it's a visual, maybe it's a flow chart. You know, where are you located? Here. Well, here's some visuals as to what it looks like, taking into account the, similar to what we have with the decks and permitting.
It would seem to me that Stillwater has a pretty vibrant downtown area, and I don't know that I've ever felt the signs are nice according to their buildings. That might be a model to use. One of our neighbors be quite like and maybe there is, well, I think there's distinct difference between our old village area type businesses that are there and what we have along the 94 corridor there. So it seems to me that there would be some variation between the two types of signing that would occur there, not maybe having some of the big signs in the old village areas that would be along the 94 corridor, and vice versa, not limiting the 94 corridor to what would be considered acceptable in the old village. I do think there's some opportunity, and Nina just showed the blade sign they have for established salon. It seems fairly small for the building size, just when you look at it as a visual. So maybe it is a little constraining. I think that was one of the things taken by the the interviews that were done with some of the businesses is it doesn't really afford the opportunity for the name of the business to be that visible.
Is there a general consensus that special sign districts would be something you'd like to see in the amendment?
I think that would make sense. I think that would make sense. We interviewed over a dozen businesses. They're mostly small businesses, single proprietor, or, family-owned. And that was one of the things that came up quite a bit was the ordinance envisions a certain kind of structure, a certain kind of building. But some of the things like Animal Inn and a tree farm are way back from the road. And so they were concerned basically that people didn't recognize that they were there because the signage was not, it didn't catch enough attention. So perhaps there's something that could be done for businesses that are not near the road. Maybe that would be something that could be possible. We talk about a district by the freeway, which it's one thing, and downtown is another, which is good. I like that idea. But to make a provision for businesses that are not visible from the road or not very visible from the road might help.
Ones where a wall sign is moot for them.
Yeah, like Animal Inn, for example, they're back 100 feet, over 100 feet, and if you're limited to a certain square foot area for the sign, it's not going to be seen. Now, you could conceivably put it up by the road, have a ground sign by the road, but perhaps they don't own that land.
Valid.
So is that maybe then even a third type of business that's not in a commercial zoned or the Old Village or the 94 corridor that's, for lack of a better term, more rural in nature on a rural roadway? So,
Or even a main highway, but
I mean, you
set
brought up a
back.
couple of good instances, I think, that a lot of people don't necessarily maybe think about the signing for, like the Animal Inn and the tree farm, related to signing.
I personally have no issue with, I would love to know why in '09 we went to the street essentially and dividing up by local collector, minor principal. Every one of those square footage amounts is less than, as an example, both the size amounts that Stillwater has, whether for their business park and highway district or for their village district. So I'd be very curious what the shift was and what those discussions were, because I don't want that to be lost. But I would also agree with the mayor, at least when I travel into downtown Stillwater, I don't find the signs to be over the top or bothersome. And I agree with the feedback from Nina that the sign out front there could easily be larger and it would not be a problem. It would not impact the flow of traffic. I don't think it would ruin the character of the area. So I would be intrigued by moving in that direction as well.
So ground signs are based on road classification, wall signs are based on building frontage, so you're just suggesting zoning district across the board?
I'll defer to my colleagues on this one as to what other thoughts are.
So, just to pose a question, because it would seem to me that ground signs, like on Lake Elmo Avenue, aren't something that's probably allowed, in part due to county right-of-way. They don't want those signs in there. Right-of-way kicks back behind curb a little ways. Similarly, I think some of the ground signs along 94, they have larger buildings that are set back a little further at times due to parking lot structures and things of that nature. Is North Hudson Boulevard considered a collector? Do we know?
I believe it is.
So all those businesses on North Hudson Boulevard, like, I'm thinking of Lambert's, you know, they have a sign on their building. I think they have a ground sign out in front. Then you step a little bit further east, and that's a block of, you know, there's the food market there and some others, but they're all signs up on the building. There's not really a property sign out in front that would list all of those. I guess, it was, I mean, I like having the old village area, 94 area. I'm not really, I don't have an answer as to how to accommodate the Animal Inns of the world and the Krieger Tree Farm. But I mean, I would suggest having two different, because they are two very different kind of business locations in how they feel and how they act. That's kind of where I'm going with that. I don't know that street classification necessarily should play into it. Maybe it does somehow.
It's interesting because Hudson Boulevard is the same classification as 50th Street, as then it goes west.
Yeah.
Yet those are two vastly different areas of our community. One is a very rural, green area, and one is a 94 business district.
But you need to remember, roadway classifications are basically based on how much traffic is there and why the traffic is there.
Yes.
So not necessarily businesses located there because of the roadway classification, although we do require commercial businesses beyond collector or above.
The other consideration you may want to think about is, I've seen requests and heard requests about I-94 having visibility from I-94 on Hudson Boulevard. Think about the medical building down there. There was a big contention concerning how high it is. Should it just be visible from Hudson Boulevard, or should it also be visible from I-94 in order to direct traffic coming to a medical center? Those are some of the issues which, based on your zones, you may even create subzones within to say where is the height limit based on where it should be seen. Adds complication to it based on elevation and perspective, but it is something another that you should at least think about, because you will get requests for variances for the height along Hudson Boulevard.
Well, we did that with the land swap with
Dairy
Tesla and Dairy Queen. So they could have their sign closer to 94 for the visibility.
Is there any concern regarding the 1 square foot of signage per 1 lineal foot of building frontage? I think that's one of the sticking points as staff I've seen. People inquire about that.
Yeah, was Stillwater similar?
1-to-1, correct?
1-to-1? And again, I'll just go off of things that seem to work. They have some smaller businesses downtown and some that take up more frontage. You're a business owner in the old village. What is that? So your blade sign, and that's 1 square foot per frontage that you have for your building?
That was the max we could do. Our signage company talked to the city, and that's what the city said our max could be. So I don't know the exact
Okay.
dimensions for it, but,
Interesting.
But you're also limited, you can't put a ground sign there because your sidewalk and the street is there. Your So in a situation where the ground sign is impossible, then there might be some break that you could do a larger wall sign, because you can't have a ground sign.
I don't know if that saw that depicted in any differences along in the Stillwater. And I appreciate getting Cottage Grove and Oakdale and Woodbury. I just think that, some of that is more in tune with the 94 corridor, maybe not so much in the Old Village, where, kind of the quaintness and the feeling of Old Village, I think the businesses wanted to retain that feeling as well. I don't want to speak out of turn, because I don't have a business downtown, but.
Well, I think if you follow the rules, it is a little tight. If you don't follow the rules and put up a sign and it's not regulated, that's different. And so it does need to be something that everybody, is on the same page, I guess.
Okay.
So would
Is-
any change be retroactive? If a person's sign is too big, they'd have to reduce it?
They would be considered a legal nonconformity, so they could maintain, if they propose to change or expand their sign, that's when they'd need to come into conformance with current requirements. So it wouldn't impact any existing legally
Okay,
placed
wouldn't force
sign.
changes out of any existing signs?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just to kind of closing thoughts, generally the wall signs 1-to-1 seems fitting. We could review special sign districts for the Old Village, I-94, and maybe some sort of agricultural or limited visibility district. Ground signs, we'll take a look, maybe change how it is classified. Instead of streets, maybe it is based on principal structure or zoning district. I think there was some support over the way Stillwater does their village district, so we'll take a look at that. We can use Oakdale's big box store to kind of guide our I-94 district, and I think staff has what we need, unless you guys have anything else you'd like us to focus on.
Well, it seems appropriate to me.
You're the chair now, by the way.
What?
You missed the election of officers.
Yeah, so what am I?
President.
Chair.
Oh, I'm president.
You just run the meeting so much better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, at the last EDA meeting, I took the action item of preparing this document, and I sent it to Christina that evening. And basically what this is what we would have to do to try to get money from the settlement, the 3 on Priority 2 settlement, that are, the trustees are the MPCA and the DNR, to pay off the general obligation bonds that were floated to pay for the landfill closure. If this were done, the city would then have the ability to use that land for something worthwhile. And I had envisioned a possibility that it could be used for a solar power generating station, either using the business model of hiring a developer and leasing the land to the developer, and then getting the lease payment each year for the value of the power that you could negotiate. The other option would be for the city to pay for the solar power station and receive all the value from the money that's sold to the electric utility. And so what I would like to propose is that the EDA recommend to council that the city attorney be assigned a little bit of time to review what we're talking about here, to see if it actually fits in with what is understood about the laws. I've talked to like Hans Neve, who is the MPCA closed landfill manager, and he seems to think that this might be okay. The idea would be to get some money out of this 20 million that's floating around for the Priority 2 for Lake Elmo, because we're the most harmed city on a per capita basis. So we should be able to get a nice chunk of money, just because, Cottage Grove, of course, has damage, and so does Oakdale, but they have a lot of people. we had to close wells, had to close private wells, and the damage per capita to Lake Elmo, I think, is quite a bit higher. So I think we have a good argument to ask for money to help the city use this land for something profitable in the future.
So what you're saying is the debt obligation is due to end in 2054 otherwise?
Right, it's amortized at the rate of 1/40th each year. It's a 40-year general obligation bond. So the current payoff is just a little over $3 million. So if we could get the $3 million from the settlement, that would allow Lake Elmo to go ahead and do something with the land. That's my understanding of it, and that's why I really need the opinion of the city attorney as to whether we're doing a correct interpretation before we file the grant proposal.
So the question to our city attorney company, and possibly to her, is simply to ask for further information as to what paying off that looks like.
Right, and to review the proposal and make sure that nothing in there is illogical or outside of the regulations.
So in your conversations, you said with MPCA, with whom was that?
The man's name is Hans Neve, Neve.
Was some of did he have feedback as to, because obviously, I know you've mentioned it's not uncommon to put solar on landfills.
Right, in fact, this land in Lake Elmo is zoned for that purpose at the moment.
I guess my question is maybe something that's not necessarily pertinent to this. Well, I am not an attorney, so I don't know how long that type of review would take. So it's kind of it's not an open-ended request per se. Obviously, there's a start and a finish. I don't know what that cost would be. Maybe it's a question to our city administrator. Obviously, when we send, if someone on council asks for a question, she just gives a quick response. Is that something that gets billed or not? Compared to then a larger thing like this, obviously there's a per hour cost. It all
Almost
gets
everything
billed.
gets billed.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to be very judicious. Do not talk about your vacation. Do not talk about your kids. I don't know where she goes on that. I guess one of my questions on this would be to Sophia. Is solar gardens allowed in this area? What are the setbacks? Is it a proper zone? Would it have to be re-guided to put a solar garden on top of this particular piece of property?
I would have to review the landfill ordinance. I know it's not included in our general solar farms. That's your ag, rural residential, and rural transitional. But I'd have to look at the landfill ordinance specifically.
I looked into that when I got permission to put a
Closer to
solar.
the mic.
I looked into that when I got permission to put the solar power generating system on my property at 50th and Lake Elmo Avenue. And the setbacks aren't that severe, they're like 50 feet. And we're talking about a 47-acre plot there. So the setback's not the issue. The main issue is what the design would be of first paying off the general obligation, the bonds, but secondly, you don't want to drive posts into a landfill. So they have a floating system that could be anchored with weights and floated, and then if the landfill had to be redone at some point, that could simply be moved, and you haven't made any holes in the ground.
So I do have the landfill ordinance pulled up. Solar farms are a conditional use, and then I will note that we just did update our solar farm ordinance within the last few months to create stricter regulations.
Well, and then, like I say, if the city attorney reviewed the plan, then we'd have a strong opinion as to whether or not it was feasible.
Yeah, so I guess when we're asking an attorney's time and questions, we want to be very judicious. You're asking specifically if the obligation bonds were paid off, what would that entitle you to be able to utilize this on this other aspect, which is a solar garden?
Right.
So basically, that seems like a fairly perfunctory question.
Right, it's a very straightforward question. Who knows what it entails, but the actual question itself is pretty simple.
So is this, I'm just looking at the agenda, is this something you're looking for to put on the 2024 EDA work plan?
Yes.
When is the application for the priority two is due in March, right?
No, the request for letters of intent is supposed to come out this spring, and the actual RFP is supposed to come out towards the end of the summer or fall.
Okay.
So we do have time to, that's why I want to deal with this now, so we can get our ducks in a row essentially, and
Okay.
then be ready to jump on it.
Okay.
So,
Jeff, just question, because you've been involved so much with the 3M PFAS settlement, priority twos. Is that the general, what's the general intention from your understanding for the priority $2?
they, well, and Administrator Schroeder and Tony are in priority
That's
two as well, and then Jim Kelly. The first primary goal is to have funds that are allocated for remediation, for bringing back, the term they use is, they used another word with R,
Habitat restoration.
restoration, and there's other money that we've indicated could be used for education, for prevention, and then we did a whole rubric as to the risk levels that they're willing to take. But generally speaking, it's to help areas that are impacted, and there will be multiple things. Some of it might be for restoration, some of it might not be for restoration. This also includes activities. It includes if the habitat was harmed, do we want to allocate dollars for activities for that area, such as putting in a fishing pier at a place that is clean because the fishing pier over here you can't use anymore. So they were doing multiple avenues. Personally, this does align with the rubric because this is an area that was harmed. I personally have no issue with having the question be posed to Sarah. I don't think it would be a substantial burden to the city, and I appreciate the originality of it. At the end of the day, it would still have to go to council for approval, which is then a different decision. But I have no issue with posing the question because at the end of the day, all the communities are going to be working with nonprofits and other groups to go after this 20 million, and it's going to go pretty quick. And so I do appreciate taking the time to try to find ways, because I know you had mentioned there are other ones that you're going to be proposing as well, and I hope others who are watching also take the time to put proposals in, but I have no issue with moving the ball forward on this. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I have no problem asking the question.
Right, the best we can do is put in a decent grant proposal and see if we get it.
Well, and even if hypothetically the grant were given, the city council still has to choose to accept it,
Of course.
which is then another, because I do have a question about putting solar and putting it into the ground of a landfill, but that's neither here nor there at this time. I think the question personally, I think is applicable, at least based upon the conversations from from the priority two.
All right.
All right, so I was going through the minutes of the last meeting to try to make these updates so we can move forward and hopefully adopt the work plan through the council. And just correct me if I'm wrong, if I misread any of the minutes, but the first goal was to develop strong relationships with existing businesses and explore options for a business retention and expansion visitation program. I believe that was voted to remove that item. I moved on the list, well, there was an increase the number of commercial industrial businesses, keeping that. And then develop data, it says talent, availability, business type, demographic information. I moved that to goal number 2, just to align with the action plan, because there were more, steps and deliverables with the first goal. And also develop the data and also communicate that information. That could be, having marketing plans and these sorts of things moving forward. Develop and maintain sense of place and create new positive community perception. That's not changed. I went and rewrote 4 based on what was just provided. All I have is just the goal, and as to explore the feasibility developing a solar farm on a former city landfill site using 3M Settlement Priority 2 grant funds. So that's currently the only thing that's in this work plan. And then we went ahead and looked at the old village. This should actually be reworded because I believe the moratorium is in place now. So we want to change it to review and make recommendations to the old village master plan. I think the EDA has a large role to play in everything related to the old village. So we want to just leave that open and kind of give ourselves flexibility moving forward as we work through this at EDA. I struck through the develop strong relationships and the action steps that were tied to that. And then I just put goals 1 and 2 together because of the lack of action steps. So develop data and communicate information, kind of combine that, and they work together. Action step that we would want to add is engage community stakeholders to determine what type of businesses they would like to see developed in Lake Elmo. This could be a very simple survey, something that we do on social media. I think it's important as we move forward, if we're looking at any type of incentives, if that's where the EDA wants to go in the future, just to understand the types of businesses that the city would like to see. And that way we could do that, this year. There's also already updating the web presence, adding inventory of availability. That kind of gets to telling the story of Lake Elmo and why you should move a business here and what the vision is of Lake Elmo. So we can definitely build that out. But the other one that we wanted to add was staff will create a needs assessment report to determine what types of business stakeholders would like to see developed in Lake Elmo. This is just a deliverable, is get all that information and then provide that back in a report to the EDA. Something very simple. I see that's something that we could do that as staff. Like, this is something that we just want to figure out what people want here. I just added this as an action, or the goal is explore the feasibility of the solar farm. Action step would be conduct a feasibility study this is before Tony submitted this. Conduct a feasibility study that will include establishing need and purpose, environmental review, talking to solar farm companies about demand, costs, and benefit to the city of Lake Elmo. Another action plan is pay off general obligation bonds on a former landfill site after we determine feasibility. That's more of a question, because I wasn't sure if you wanted that as an action step.
Well, it sounds like that would be an action step involved with if the grant is accepted and approved, correct?
Right, it has to be feasible before they'd give money, so we have to do some of the background. I have met with a couple of solar developers, and we did review the property, so I believe it's feasible, but again, we have to get a written opinion that we can put into the grant proposal,
Okay.
which I'll do.
And I think it's something staff can work on and just figure out feasibility. If we can work with the utility, if it's something that it's more of a lease model and a private company would come in, it doesn't cost the city money to establish it. We want to just gather all that information for the EDA and then bring it back, is pretty much what I'm taking from the action step and what's being discussed. The grant application, it sounds like there's deadlines. That's something, that I'm just hearing about. So I definitely want to work with you and figure out if we can meet those deadlines and how we're going to move forward and do that as a group. But I know that you've been working on it. So I'll be reaching out to you this week and following up just to make sure we don't miss any of those deadlines.
Right, there is a schedule out, but it's not hard and fast. They don't have particular dates, they say spring or fall, something like that. And Jeff and I are both heavily involved with it.
They do not have dates yet. For reviewing then the Old Village Plan, determine if an update is needed, how do you foresee then the role with the EDA, given that we meet quarterly? Obviously, we have 49 weeks-ish on this, and obviously, council gave some direction as well. What would you foresee from your perspective as to what kind of role the EDA can help with?
I think I definitely want to bring this to the EDA. So if it's a workshop with the council, maybe that would work, or a special meeting, just trying to figure out how all this works here. But I would like to work through the Old Village Plan, because we do need to establish how we're going to approach it, if we are going to have funds allocated to create a new plan, or we're going to look at the old plan and just make updates to the zoning code, and maybe look at the comprehensive land use map, look at zoning, areas too. The other thing we talked about with staff with the sign ordinances, this is a good time to figure out what we want to do in the old village, and then update the sign code to make sure it matches what's being proposed in the old village. But I think EDA in the future, in terms of any of the tools that are available through the state statutes, is just understanding like where opportunities could be, and if EDA does want to engage, how they can. So that's going to be an ongoing, I think, conversation we're going to have moving forward with that. And I just think EDA, you know, it's a mixed-use district, so it's good to tie everybody together.
So given that we have less than 1 year, and it's a moratorium, and the entire goal was to make some of these changes to the Old Village area, all the way out to Manning, to the east, I would throw it out to fellow members of the EDA. Would you also be willing, if there is a need, where we might need to meet maybe more than once a quarter, depending upon what comes up? If it's a workshop, if it's a special meeting, if it's a community engagement meeting, because this is a once-in-a-generation type opportunity.
I personally would be willing to meet more than once.
And we're not talking 22 times, maybe like twice, but obviously,
I think, yeah, community engagement kind of opportunity, whether it's an open house or whatever, because in our history, surveys have lacked substantial information coming through, just from lack of participation. But yeah, I'd certainly be willing to, you know, attend a couple more meetings regarding this.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay.
Okay. Everything else was what was already included, attachments of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The map is there, I didn't remove it. And then I just placed the minutes here just
Sure.
for an update. But other than that, just adding those items and moving forward and bringing this to the council for adoption.
Looks fair to me. Somebody want to make a motion to accept the 2024 EDA work plan as presented by Jason?
so moved.
Can you get a
second.
second? And we have a motion by Councilmember Holtz, by EDA member Tony Manzera. Any discussion? And based on the time, and so I'm going to call the question without much discussion. All those in favor of forwarding the work plan to be reviewed and accepted by the city council, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. With that, future meetings, May 21st at this time. There may be another meeting called before